Now, today for our daily cancellation, let's look at two stories that are happening at the same time. First, Morgan Wallen is watching his career implode before his eyes as a consequence of a video that catches the country music star, using a racial slur. Now, Wallen and his buddies were laughing and carrying on after returning home from a night of drinking this past weekend, and their antics were so loud and disruptive that they woke up the neighbors, one of whom decided to pull out a phone and document the commotion. Unfortunately for Wallen, the camera had been turned on right before he shouted to one of his friends across the street, presumably referring to another friend who was in perhaps an especially drunken state. He said, "Take care of this blank N-word." Here's the video.
Take care of this. Hey, y'all too.
Hey, take care of this.
Oh.
Hey, Gracie, take care of this.
Okay, so I wanted you to see or hear that just to get the tone of it. It's clear that Wallen used a word he should not have used. It's also clear that he didn't mean for it to be public, though he did shout it in the street, which is not a good way of keeping things private. And he meant it as a joke, okay? Nonetheless, as expected, the penalties have been quite significant. Wallen apologized profusely, but that didn't stop the inevitable from happening. His record label suspended him. The Academy of Country Music Awards revoked his eligibility. Cumulus Media, iHeartMedia, and SiriusXM pulled all of his songs from their stations, effectively removing him from the radio altogether. Okay? This is the swiftest and harshest backlash we have probably seen against a star musician in I don't know how long. Years, at least. Even though star musicians do and say objectionable things all the time. While Wallen's star is rapidly plummeting after saying one offensive thing, a thing which, if context matters, was said drunkenly and in jest, another star is ascending again after a minor and temporary dip. The juxtaposition here, I think, is quite instructive. Nick Cannon and Viacom CBS have reunited and are feeling so good, and the production of his VH1 series Wild 'N Out will resume following a brief suspension of their relationship following comments that Cannon made on his podcast last summer. Now, you might remember what provoked the backlash was Cannon's claim that black people can't be anti-Semitic because they are the Semitic people and they are, quote, the true Hebrews. This is what prompted the brief severing of ties with Viacom CBS and an apology from Cannon. But that's all water under the bridge now, apparently. Cannon's career is back and it's on track and he's rolling again, no problem. But the true Hebrews stuff wasn't close to the worst thing he said during the podcast. The really offensive and racist remarks were never acknowledged by the media or by Cannon himself or even by Viacom CBS when they initially condemned his statements. They just ignored this part. Cannon, in fact, has faced no consequence, not even a temporary consequence, for his actual racist diatribe in which he claimed that white people fear black, quote unquote, and have a, quote, lack of compassion because of their melanin deficiency. And if that wasn't enough, he also said that white people are, quote, a little less, read, inferior to black people, and that because they don't have the power of the sun, they behave, quote, out of fear, out of low self-esteem, and out of deficiency, and can, quote, only act evil, robbing and raping in order to survive, he says. White people, Cannon says, are, quote, closer to animals and are, quote, the true savages. Okay, these are all things that he said. This is by far and away the most racist thing that any celebrity of his stature has said in many years. If you've got a more racist thing, then let me know. And he never apologized for it. And now he has his job back. So let's stack these two situations up against each other. Wallen used a racial slur in a non-racial context, was drunk and joking, and never meant for it to be recorded. Cannon, on the other hand, expressed his true feelings about white people with thorough detail and did so publicly and proudly. His opinion, as he says himself, is that white people are subhuman, animalistic savages and are inferior to him. So who's committed the greater sin here? Who suffered the worst consequence? Objectively, there is little doubt that Wallen is the lesser offender, also the lesser human by Nick Cannon's way of thinking, and even less doubt that he has endured the more severe professional consequences. He's also the only one between the two of them who apologized. So, talking about privilege as we were earlier, who has the real privilege here? The man who said a bad thing apologized and lost his career anyway, or the man who said a worse thing didn't apologize and got his career back. You cannot say that the first man has all the privilege without removing all meaning from the word privilege. So is it enough then in that case to say that white privilege is a myth, but black privilege is real? Is that what I'm getting to here? No, not quite. Because if it were as simple as that, then Candace Owens, not only black but a woman as well, would enjoy all of Nick Cannon's privilege and then some. But that's clearly not the case. So rather than black or white privilege, it's probably more accurate to speak of identity privilege, or more accurately, tribal privilege. Your privilege is tied to your tribe. And within the privileged tribe, the pecking order is determined by a complicated and convoluted hierarchy of identities. Nick Cannon can survive and thrive in spite of his insanely racist views, or even partly because of them maybe, due first and foremost to his leftism. Okay, now if Cannon were a conservative, an acolyte of, Thomas Sowell instead of Louis Farrakhan, there would be no redemption arc for him. So, but within that leftist tribe, which affords him power and prestige to begin with, he earns his rank according to his racial and sexual identity. Though the privilege of his tribe, so through the privilege of his tribe and by its own internal rules, he can say pretty much whatever he wants about race. But he's not at the very top of the intersectional heap. So if instead of white people, he had labeled, say, gay people or transgenders or women as, quote, a little less, then he'd be banished from polite society with all the same speed and vigor that has been directed at Morgan Wallen. Now, as for Morgan Wallen, he's white, a country singer, and he lives in Nashville, which makes him, for all intents and purposes anyway, a conservative, or at least conservative adjacent. He is the wrong race and in the wrong tribe. The only privilege he has then is the kind he can buy with all his wealth. And that'll probably be enough to keep him comfortable for a while, but not enough to save his career or his reputation. And this is privilege. This is how privilege works. Nick Cannon shows exactly how privilege works. It's kind of confusing. It's a tangled web indeed, but this is the way it goes. And this is why the concept of white privilege is canceled. And Nick Cannon is canceled. By me anyway, if not by anybody else. For whatever that's worth, which is, unfortunately, nothing at all. Hey, listen, hit the subscribe button. Do it right now. I demand it. And I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.